Hi, I'd like to start by acknowledging the Circle of Care for Home project partners, the Sheffield Teaching Hospitals, the University of Sheffield, Sheffield Hallam University and Sensory Technologies. So what will I offer today and how will this help you? I will share our story of how we use telementoring technology to develop the stroke workforce in a community stroke team, and how John Cotter's 8-step change model helped me to navigate this project. Hopefully I'll share with you some tips that we learned along the way, and this story may offer some inspiration, thoughts and ideas on how you might use technology in your service. I'd like to thank Community Stroke Services in Sheffield. They're a multidisciplinary team serving patients in their own home. So what is CC4H? This is a digital health platform, and we used it to transform the way that we deliver services in Sheffield. We developed a workforce of Band 4 specialist rehab assistants to independently manage a cohort of patients that would normally be seen by registered members of staff on a mission to the service and in their journey through the service. This is our story of transformational change, and to help follow this story, I will share the 8 steps of change which were published by John Cotter in his book, Our Iceberg is Melting. So tip number 1 is, this is a favourite book of mine, and for many reasons, but importantly because it enabled me to change the nature of my conversations around change and enable me to think differently about how people respond to change. So it's a very quick 45-minute read, and it's the story of a group of penguins who find out their iceberg is melting and in danger of being broken up. On the surface, it's a really simple story of a colony of penguins facing a dilemma. But contained within the story, there are some powerful characters and a powerful message about fear of change and how to motivate people in change. So the 8 steps will be threaded throughout the presentation today. So here are the 8 steps. Create a sense of urgency, build a coalition, create a vision, share the vision, empower others, create quick wins, build on change and embed the change. So a service manager was looking for a solution to a problem around managing capacity and demand in this community stroke service. And fresh from their success in piloting this technology in palliative care, the team at the University of Sheffield and Sheffield Hallam University were looking to try out this telementoring technology in another service. Carl Jung describes synchronicity as a meaningful coincidence of 2 or more events where something other than the probability of chance is involved. So whether it was coincidence or synchronicity, this is where our story begins. So step 1 is to develop a sense of urgency. To spark the initial motivation and to get things moving, the team started some discussions about the difficulties and challenges in the service. This open and honest dialogue was really important to build a sense of urgency around the need for change, the need to do something. John Cotter says that building a sense of urgency requires an extensive dialogue, and we need to talk about the risks of not changing. So the first tip is understanding the problem and looking at it from different perspectives. The community stroke services was time limited and also a finite resource. The team identified there were a cohort of patients coming through the service that had more light touch rehabilitation needs. And some data that they collected show that around 10 to 15% of the patients coming through perhaps didn't need a qualified member of staff. The current service didn't have any band 4 rehab support workers, and there were some concerns about retaining the band 3 rehab support workers that they'd got. There were occasional capacity issues with patients waiting 1 to 2 weeks for an assessment from a registered member of staff. So the technology was called eShift. It was an online patient record which enabled monitoring of tasks that were happening in the home by a visit director back at base. And this was used in Sheffield in palliative care services. It was tested out, and some outcomes of that project had been published. The findings from the St. Luke's project showed that by using this telementoring technology, they avoided unnecessary admissions to hospital, reduced the percentage of admissions through the emergency department. They had improved patient-reported experiences, and it had enabled them to have more junior members of staff involved in home visits and upskilled other members of staff. So sensory technologies has been used in other parts of the world, and it had also been used in Canadian stroke services. So we were keen to learn where else the technology had been used and what the outcomes of those projects were. So tip number 3 is to learn from what others have done. So the next step was to form a powerful coalition. And this was like a group of people from across the organisation that would drive and support the change. And so we created a project team with stakeholders, and this included service leads, researchers, tech partners, organisational representatives. To build momentum around the change, it did require that strong leadership and visible support from key organisational leaders. The executive team for stroke were sponsoring the project and required ongoing dialogue and feedback, and regular meetings. So tip number 4 is, for successful transformation, you need a range of superpowers, a team of individuals bringing together their unique skills and talents to the project. We had a credible and respected member of the team to represent the views of the wider workforce on the steering group project. She was the voice of practicality and reality, and her superpower was approachable. People could approach her and talk to her about their concerns. So by working as a team, the coalition helped to build momentum around the project, and also build that sense of urgency that we needed to change and we needed to do something. So step number 3 was to create a vision and tell the story of how the changes we wanted to make would address the problem. As well as talking to people and having like one-to-one conversations and team discussions, we also made a video. Trigger videos have been used in other improvement approaches, such as experience-based co-design. They can tell the story of a problem, and they can tell that story from the perspective of the patient or the user, and prompt discussion around key issues. So I'm just going to show you now, if I can, a little bit of the video that we made. And this video that we used to talk to stakeholders about the project. So here you can see we videoed some patients in their own home, and we utilised the technology in the patient's own home to show how it would be used. There's usually a commentary this video that's not playing currently, but I will provide access to this video if anybody would like to watch it afterwards. So you can see in real time, the director back at the base is talking to the Band 4 specialist rehab assistant in the property and giving some advice and feedback in real time while she is on the visit. Okay. So what we then had to do was to, once we'd created the vision, was to communicate that vision and to tell the story of what we wanted to do to everybody. And this is how we use the video. We use it with stakeholders to have those conversations. We also organised a demonstration of the eShift technology that was used in the St Luke's Hospice, and we enable people to ask questions, have conversations, not just in meetings, but also those water cooler moments where people get together and discuss what they've seen. So tip 5 is to listen, be open and honest, and address the emotional dimensions of people's fears and concerns. And there were many fears and concerns that people had. They weren't sure how it would enhance the team. One of the biggest fears was, will it take over my job? Will technology reduce my amount of patient contact? They also had fears about the training. Will I be able to use the technology? I'm not very technologically skilled. So there's lots of concerns about that. And also the relevance to the UK, as eShift hadn't been used in stroke services in the UK. So how would this be relevant? So there's lots of concerns that we had to address. And, as Greenhouse says, non-adoption and abandonment of technologies is very common. So it's really important in these early stages that you address people's concerns. So our next tip is tip 6, and this is about slow looking. So it's the art of learning through observation, and this is a technique that I've stolen from the art world, and it's about looking long and hard at the environment that you work in. And I learned about this when I was doing a master's in clinical research, and I was involved in an art installation where we were using art to communicate the outcomes of research. And what we found was this idea of slow looking is really important to be able to spend time with a problem and get a greater understanding of what's going on and build your connection to that problem. And the harder you look, the more likely it is that you'll see things that you didn't see before, allowing yourself to make discoveries. So that's what we did. We did some slow looking. We looked at the challenges within the service, and we translated this into some co-design workshops where we had dedicated time to think and reflect with the team about the current processes and how they could be different. It took time to understand those challenges, but it's a real opportunity to think about the problem from different perspectives, play with ideas and test them out, look at data, analyse processes. And the workshops included the whole team. They were very inclusive, from the admin support to the people on the ground, to the operational leaders. Everybody's view was valued and was of equal importance. We also looked at, we tried to look at things that were quite familiar to people. And there's this idea of looking at things through alien eyes. Greenhalgh says the more complex an innovation or the setting in which it is introduced, the less likely it is to be successfully adopted, upscaled, spread and sustained. So it's really important to get different perspectives and views and explore things through alien eyes so that you understand what's going on. So the workshops were led by Dr. Joe Langley and the research team at Sheffield Hallam. Co-design principles and methodologies underpin the design work. We compared ourselves with other services. We looked at the flow of patients through the service. We paused and reflected and did that slow looking. We thought about how research could be embedded into the evaluation, and we used design thinking approaches. We made it interesting and fun, and you know, people enjoyed the workshops, and I think that helped us to get more out of it. So this was a quote from a member of staff. We didn't have a clear idea to start with. The freedom to think about new ways of doing things was difficult from the start, and starting with a blank piece of paper was challenging. You know, we had to appreciate that. So this work culminated in the development of a new service model where Band 4 specialist rehab assistants would see a cohort of patients usually seen by a registered member of staff. The cohort of patients had less complex needs and would be triaged into the project. And this group of patients would be assessed and treated by a member of staff under the remote guidance of a senior therapist. The senior therapist would oversee the visits taking place by monitoring the visit in real time online, viewing any documents and templates submitted to the system. So the scope for this service was hotly debated and continues to be so. We decided what was in and what was out and developed a criteria for the triage. The main idea was that patients were seen quicker and regularly for the duration of their journey through their community rehab service, and they were supported by a therapy director back at base. So we actually changed the name of the system from eShift to eRehab, which we felt reflected more of what we wanted to achieve. And we started to operationalize the plan and think about how would we achieve this vision of introducing this new technology, and what would the visits look like? So this is the stage where we moved beyond the planning and talking into the action phase, and it really was about empowering us, everyone involved in the project, to think about how we would overcome particular obstacles. And this is where, you know, it was important to get everybody's perspective and involve the people that would use the technology as agents of that change, empower them to act, include them in the project, and encourage everyone to participate. At times it did feel a bit like shark infested waters. There were definitely no fluffy penguins under that tightrope. There were quite a lot of obstacles to remove, and importantly, human factors. So dealing with skepticism and fear and genuine concern, keeping everybody involved and engaged in the project, and adapting to new ways of working. Of course, we had to pause developments. We were doing this project in the midst of the pandemic. We had to adapt our circumstances, and you know, we certainly weren't expecting to deliver this project in pandemic conditions. At times it did look quite messy, and it's about being comfortable with the uncomfortable and working through things together. We were introducing the new technology and training everyone to use it in the pandemic. So we had to adapt the ways that we did that. We were developing the templates and testing them out on the system, writing job specs and job descriptions, developing competencies and training plans and training people. All this required involvement of multiple stakeholders and the intended users of the technology working together to overcome barriers. So one thing that people did appreciate was that when we were able to, we provided them with lunch. And I've always known that cake can overcome many obstacles. However, it can't overcome everything. So we did need a bit of a strategy to deal with those obstacles. And, you know, having regular communication meetings, formally and informally, really helped that. Being visible in the office, having drop-in sessions, getting regular feedback and listening to concerns, discussing what we'd found, the potential benefits and pitfalls, but having that pioneering spirit and that give it a go attitude. And we did, you know, we did say this is a project, there is an end to it. We'd like to think that beyond it, we would, you know, have developed a new model, but if all else fails, it won't be happening forever. So, you know, that comforted the people that were really anxious about the project. So the training and development had to be quite creative in the pandemic. We did a lot of things to enable people to get familiar with the technology. We did online training sessions that were led from Canada. When we could, we enabled shadowing of the different roles. We did a lot of role play. In fact, we spent a whole day doing role play where we had a lab which we could set up as a home environment, and we role played patients, and we role played being the Band 4 specialist and the director, and everybody had a go at the different roles. We filmed those role plays and recorded them and watched them back to learn from them, to learn about the things that we needed to do. We had in-house training where we did, the Band 4s went on a course to learn more about stroke, and they had individual training sessions, and we made the video. So there's lots and lots of ways that we creatively looked at training for this project to get people comfortable with using the technology. So the beauty of eRehab is at the touch of a button, you can get data about the service that you're delivering. And what I'm going to share with you now is some snapshots of that data. The eRehab has a reporting system called Clarity, which you can draw through multiple reports generated in real time about the data that's been put in the system, so we can see at the touch of a button. So to hand is admission and discharge data, so we can see within timeframes how many patients are coming in and out of the service. We also have demographic data that's collected around age, gender, and postcode. We have length of stay data and the number of clinical hours that have been utilised and the number of visits that have been done. And we have heat maps to show where in the city patients are being visited, which is immensely helpful when you're distributing your resource across a large city. We were able to see at a glance what templates were submitted into the system and how they were being used by the rehab specialists. So we developed 24 templates, some of which were required to be used on the first visit or the discharge visit, and some which could be drawn down and used as and when appropriate. So we could see at the touch of a button which of those templates were used in which month and how those templates were being utilised. So for example, if I wanted to see on how many visits an environmental assessment was completed, I could drill down into that data and have a look. We could also see at the touch of a button how we were doing with outcome measures. And we selected a number of outcome measures which we thought were pertinent to this patient group. We could see quite easily how we were performing on completing those outcome measures, and again could drill down to the scores that were taken at the start of the visit and at the end of the visit for patients as well. We were also able to see things like if mood screens were completed, how many of them were done and on which patients. So there's a tremendous amount of data to us accessible, which I can say as a service manager, I've never had that level of data before in real time at the touch of a button. So step 6 of John Cutter's guide is to look at quick wins. So he says success breeds success. And it's really important to get that taste of victory in the change process, to give people a clear sight of what is the vision that you want to realise. It's important to celebrate successes, to counter critics and negative influences, and also look at things that might otherwise impede your progress with the plan. So we set out objectives for ourselves. We measured our performance against those objectives. We had action plans. We held project meetings quite regularly so we could look at the milestones in the project. And, you know, looking at the quick wins really helped build morale and also momentum for the project. So here are some of the quick wins that I'm able to share with you so far. Patient feedback data was collected ongoing throughout the project, and this showed some really positive results, some qualitative data and narratives around patient experience. We also collected narratives around the Band 4 rehab assistants experience and their job satisfaction, which had increased. Back in April, we knew that we'd done 86 independent visits had taken place. 31 of those visits had been supervised, and 15 instructions had been given online while a visit was in progress. So we knew that the mentoring was taking place. The rehab assistants and the directors had gained new digital skills and had learned how to use the new system and use it on laptops and on my mobile phones. And we also knew that we were providing continuity of care. And in April, we'd had 27 patients through the service, and they'd all received one-to-one interventions from the rehab assistant that they were allocated. So in real time, we were able to look at the data and the analytics and understand how the service was progressing. And we were able to look at utilisation of our resources. So this group of patients were seen by the trained rehab assistants, which meant that the other staff could be seeing the more complex patients. So this is some feedback that we got from the patients. Everything was covered, and I thought the best part was the information about having a stroke and getting the equipment I needed. Other patients commented about how they'd got their confidence back. So, you know, we got some very personal feedback from patients about what their experience had been, and nothing to suggest that their experience had been any less than high quality. It was also really important for us to collect the staff feedback, and this was really fascinating, because it gave us some insights into what it had been like to work more autonomously, to use the technology, and to have the freedom to see patients right from the beginning right to the end of their stay within the service. There were some really nice things in that it identified learning needs that we were able to address. For example, one of the assistants had not done very much on sleep hygiene in the past, so we were able to provide some bespoke training so that she was able to support a patient that was having difficulty with sleeping. And one of the assistants said to me, every day is a learning day, and I really love that. And that joy of feeling like you're making a difference really came across in the qualitative data that we collected about the rehab support workers' experience. So step number 7 is about building on that change, and it's important that you celebrate the successes as you go along, but it's also important that you examine any failures and any difficulties that you've encountered to see what can be improved. So tip number 9 is nothing is set in stone. This is very much an iterative process, and it requires constant evaluation and feedback loops and learning about how the technology is integrated into practice and adapting it as you go along. And we were very fortunate to be able to adapt the templates and to adapt the technology system. So we worked with our tech provider to do that as we were learning about using the technology, and have that continuous improvement culture and that idea of continually learning as we went along. So we were really building from the change. And this is important because we're only just under halfway through the project, so we are still building on that change. There's so much that we've yet to learn, and it's really important that we continue this culture of continuous learning. It's by no means the end. There are many chapters to our story to complete, and we are keeping going to embed the technology, collect the data, and evaluate as we go along. Now, step 8, which we haven't got to yet, is embedding the change. And this is about cultural change, and as a leader, it's about you supporting that continual engagement and supporting behaviours that enable change to be sustained. And this is where the coalition and the team is really important. We talk about the successes, we talk about the failures, and we have that continual dialogue. And eventually we will come to a point where we have developed a model that we want to start sustaining. We need to make sure that embedding technology isn't a passing fad or a change, that we do adapt, and we remain flexible, but we have this culture of embracing innovation rather than fearing it. So we've not quite got to this stage yet, but I wanted to share with you what stage 8 does entail. So, in summary, this project it's about an innovation project. It's about using technology. It's also about embedding research and evaluation in that process. And what we've been able to do is we've been able to capture change as it's gone along. We've been able to capture and measure impact and understand where we've been successful and where we've not been successful. And I think that's been one of the best things about having an academic team to support the innovation project. So just to summarise, our top tips that we've learnt so far are: use a change theory to guide your plan. The Cotter steps or someone else's change theory is really helped solidify what we wanted to do. Start by understanding the problem and learn from what others have done. And for successful transformation, you really do need that range of superpowers, a team of individuals coming together, bringing their unique skills and talents to the project. Important to listen, be open and honest, and to address the emotional dimension of change and of people's fears and concerns. Employ slow looking and learn through observation. I know this takes time, but it's really important. Use your alien eyes to look at things from different perspectives. Use co-design principles and methodologies to work in partnership with people and to underpin the design work. Nothing is set in stone. It's very much an iterative process and does require that constant reevaluation and feedback loop. And finally, embed research and evaluation in the process. It's so important to help capture the changes, measure impact, and understand where you've been successful. So I'd just like to finally, again, acknowledge our partners in the project. There are some references. Volume 1 of our story has been published, and you can see that at the top of the reference list. And we are going to be publishing Volume 2 of our story later this year. Thank you for listening today, and I appreciate being invited to share our story with you. Thank you very much.